Let's start with the most important question first. Why would you use TypeScript with React? And the answer isn't really related to React. Instead, the answer is why in general you would use TypeScript. Because it adds type safety to your JavaScript code. It can lead to better JavaScript code because it can help you catch errors earlier, not at runtime, but instead whilst you're still writing code. And that's therefore, of course, also the case when using TypeScript with React. There, it's easy to overlook a prop that needs to be added to a component and that then causes issues if it's not there. And it's also easy to pass the wrong type of data to a prop, for example, or mess up other type-related things. And with TypeScript, you simply see those errors earlier. You see them whilst you're writing code, and you can therefore then fix them immediately. Now, using TypeScript also sometimes means that you need to write slightly more complex code than you would normally write. Because clearly defining the right type in the right situations can sometimes be tricky, though honestly, in most cases, it's not. And that's, by the way, also why I created this course, to show you how you can use TypeScript with React in general, but of course also to dive into these slightly more complex scenarios and problems that you might also sometimes face. Now, this course does not assume any prior TypeScript knowledge, though it will of course be helpful. But you don't need it because the next course section will give you an introduction to TypeScript. Just TypeScript. Thereafter, in the subsequent sections, we'll then use TypeScript in conjunction with React. And speaking of React, you will need basic React knowledge for this course. There is no React refresher included, and this course will not teach you React. I will explain some of the more advanced React concepts once we use them, so that this course really is for everyone, even if you have just basic React knowledge, but you do at least need that basic level of React knowledge. Well, and then, as mentioned, we'll start by taking a look at just TypeScript, before we then thereafter see how we can use TypeScript with React, and then also dive into more specific and sometimes more complex use cases. We'll explore how we can type more complex components, so how we can add the right types if our components are non-trivial. We'll explore how we can use TypeScript with state and slightly more advanced features like the context API or use reducer. And we'll also explore what it means to use TypeScript with side effects and data fetching, as well as the Redux library. So that by the end, you really should have a solid understanding of how you can use TypeScript in your projects. So now that you know what's in the course and what this course is about, I just want to make sure that you really get the most out of this course. And that, of course, starts with watching the videos, because it is a video on demand course. And since it's on demand, I can really only encourage you that you watch the videos at your pace. Use those video player controls to slow me down if I'm going too fast, or speed me up if I'm going too slow. Also, definitely feel free to pause and rewind and repeat certain lectures or even entire sections. That's the advantage of an on-demand course. You can repeat parts that aren't clear immediately or that you maybe simply want to practice again. Speaking of practicing, that's of course always important. This course contains a couple of demo projects and will write a lot of code. And I can only encourage you that you pause the videos frequently to try out the next steps on your own without me explicitly telling you to do so. And it's of course also a good idea to come back to this course and come back to parts of that course after a couple of days or weeks, and that you then try to build those demo projects again on your own. That will be a great exercise, and of course, as always, only practice makes perfect. Therefore, you should of course also use the knowledge you gain in this course and try to apply it on your own projects. Now, when following along with this course in code, it's of course absolutely possible that you'll face some errors, that you're not able to reproduce my results. That's why attached to this lecture, you find a link to a GitHub repository that contains multiple code snapshots for every course section. You can use these snapshots to compare your code to mine and therefore then hopefully find a solution for your problems. If you're getting stuck, you can of course also use the Q&A board, but I really encourage you to not just ask there, but to also answer and help other students. Because by answering, you're challenged to think about a problem and come up with a solution, and you'll learn much more by doing that than by just asking and waiting for a response. In addition to that Q&A section, you also might want to join our free Discord community to find like-minded developers there. And with that, you should have everything you need to get the most out of this course. So we're going to get started writing code soon, but in order to write code, we'll need a project where we will write that code. Now, throughout this course, in all those course sections, I will provide you with starting projects, starting code snapshots, which you can use if you do want to follow along with your own code. And I will always provide two versions: a zip file, which you can download if you want to follow along locally, or a code sandbox snapshot if you want to follow along in the browser without installing anything on your system. So without installing Node and the TypeScript compiler or anything else. But speaking of that, we will get started with TypeScript and with the setup we need to write TypeScript code in the next section, and therefore, let's now go there.